Hey guys, tonight we're heading behind convent walls, not for prayer but for secrets. Because these nuns, yeah, they're not what you learned about in school. Forget the soft halos and harp music. You're about to step into a world where desire claws under woolen habits, where silence is full of whispered names, and where not everyone makes it out with their faith or reputation intact. And just a heads up, you probably won't survive this. If you were dropped into a 13th century convent as you are right now, you'd last maybe a week before getting accused of heresy or worse, caught with a forbidden book or a face showing too much curiosity. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like this post and follow, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I share here. And hey, tell me, what city are you in, and what time is it where you are right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let's ease into this journey together. You arrive as the heavy wooden gates shut behind you. Stone walls surround the convent like a fortress. No going back now. The sky is still gray, not quite morning, and you're handed a rough woolen robe that smells faintly of smoke and something herbal, like dried thyme. No shoes. You're barefoot, and your skin prickles as cold creeps up from the flagstones. A grim-faced sister leads you down a corridor where light leaks through narrow slits in the wall. You can hear your breath echo in the silence. This is where you'll be reborn, they say. You're not supposed to think about your family name anymore or what you once dreamed of. You belong to God now, but the tension in the air doesn't feel holy. It feels heavy, like a place where secrets have weight. You meet the abbess briefly. Her face is lined like tree bark, eyes sharp as crows. She doesn't speak to you directly. Instead, she turns to one of the older sisters and mutters something in Latin, and you catch the word novice. That's you. Not a full nun. Not yet. You'll spend the next year in limbo, learning the rules, watching your every step, praying more than sleeping. They'll decide whether you're fit to take your final vows or not. Your first task, scrub the cloister walk with a brush no bigger than your palm. You do this next to another novice, Sister Magdala, who mutters under her breath about useless piety and rolls her eyes every time someone passes. She was sent here because her older brother got all the inheritance, and her parents didn't want to pay to marry her off. A common story. You're not here because you're holy. You're here because you're disposable. By the time Compline comes, the final prayer of the day, you've been on your knees for hours, and you smell like vinegar and sweat. You're taken into the chapel, a small space with flickering beeswax candles and a large wooden crucifix that seems to watch you. You sing the psalms in Latin, stumbling over the words. Your stomach growls, but food isn't offered again until tomorrow. Hunger, they say, purifies. You sleep in the dormitory on a straw mattress lined up next to 20 others. The scent of sweat, old linens, and candle smoke is thick in the air. But you don't sleep easily. In the next bed over, a nun whispers someone's name, not Christ's. Here's the part they don't teach you in your average church history class. Medieval convents weren't always solemn places of peace and purity. They were deeply political, often volatile spaces filled with women who didn't choose to be there. Many were dumped by their families, too rebellious, too poor for a dowry, or just inconvenient. Some were former wives whose husbands had died. Others were noble daughters considered too mouthy to marry. They were cloistered, yes, but they carried their pain and ambitions with them. And they talked. That's the real scandal. The silence was full of words passed between beds, behind cloisters, under breath, stories, prayers, complaints, poetry, and sometimes much more. You notice quickly that the abbess has favorites. Sister Joan, always at her side, wears her veil a bit looser than the others, her hands never dirty, never scrubbing floors. You find out later that Joan was born of noble blood, and rumor says her family bribed the abbess handsomely to ensure her daughter lived comfortably. Joan watches you too, a little too closely. Now, let's throw in a quirky fringe fact, because you deserve one. Did you know that some medieval nuns kept pet squirrels? Seriously, there are records, actual medieval manuscripts, describing nuns who raised red squirrels in their cells, feeding them bits of dried fruit, and letting them nest in their robes. Why squirrels? Who knows? Maybe it was the medieval version of an emotional support animal. Or maybe they just liked something that bit everyone else but curled up in their lap. Back to the tension. As you try to sleep, you hear keys jingling. Sister Rebecca, making her rounds, is the convent's enforcer. She doesn't pray as much as she patrols, sniffing out whispers and rebellious thoughts. If she finds you with contraband, a secular book, a stolen apple, you get sent to the reflection cell, which is less reflection and more cold stone box. She especially hates laughter. Sister Rebecca hasn't laughed in years, you're told, ever since she caught two nuns holding hands after Compline. Here's something scholars still debate. Were medieval convents truly enclaves of spirituality, or were they more like prisons disguised as religious institutions? Some argue they offered safety and education to women who had nowhere else to go. Others believe they were cages, sometimes gilded, often brutal, where inconvenient women were silenced. Both can be true. It depends on the convent, the nun, and what you choose to believe. But tonight, your faith doesn't matter. What matters is that you're here. The doors are locked, and the first layer of holiness has already begun to peel away. Morning doesn't come with sunlight. It comes with bells, loud, clanging, insistent bells that rip you out a half-dream where you're back home, barefoot in a meadow, eating something that isn't barley stew. You're not alone in groaning. The entire dormitory stirs at once, like a hive suddenly poked. Bodies rise in the dark, some already murmuring morning prayers, others muttering curses too quiet for anyone holy to hear. The air is still cold, and someone's candle won't light, so you're dressing in the dim, struggling into your stiff wool robe while your toes freeze against the stone floor. Outside, the cloister is wrapped in fog. The frost crunches under your feet as you're led in silence to lauds, the first of the day's 8 canonical hours. The chapel stone walls hold the chill like a grudge, and the nuns' breath clouds in front of their faces as they chant the psalms. Your voice blends into the chorus, not because you know what you're saying, but because not knowing is better than standing out. You're already starting to understand the rules. Silence is safe, questions are dangerous, and obedience is everything. After prayer, it's time for the day's assignments. Sister Magdala is sent to the garden to prune the rose bushes. Even in winter, the thorns must be managed. You're sent to the scriptorium to assist in the binding room, where they're copying devotional texts by hand. It sounds peaceful in theory. In reality, it smells like parchment and boiled leather, and the nun in charge, Sister Cataline, has a sharp eye for mistakes and a sharper tongue. You're tasked with slicing vellum pages with a curved blade so fine it could double as a surgical instrument. Your fingers tremble, but no one cares. You slice anyway, careful not to bleed on the sacred text. And there, as you settle into the rhythm of repetitive tasks, you begin to hear the other stories. One of the older nuns, Sister Isabel, talks softly as she sharpens quills. Her voice is dry, brittle as old paper. Many of us were given a God before we could walk, she says, not looking at you. My father had 5 daughters, no sons. The dowry for a marriage was 3 times what it cost to place me here. She taps her inkpot once. Economics, not piety. That's the truth of this place. It starts to settle on your shoulders like dust. This isn't a sanctuary of chosen devotion. It's a storage facility for inconvenient women, daughters not pretty enough, not obedient enough, not rich enough to marry off, widows too young, girls too clever, bastards too visible. The convent walls are thick, but they aren't built just to keep sin out. They're built to keep these women in. You start noticing how many of the sisters carry their family histories like wounds under their habits. Some have resigned themselves, their voices hollowed out by years of obedience. Others still burn, quiet and slow, with something that might be anger or might be faith. It's hard to tell. A few still fight. There's one, Sister Avis, who catches your eye during the midday meal. She doesn't bow her head as long as the others when grace is said. She chews slower. She looks around. Later, when you're rinsing bowls in the freezing wash house, she brushes past and whispers, "Don't let your thoughts get lazy." That's when they win. She's gone before you can ask what she meant or who they are. Now, here's something bizarre you learn around this time. Medieval nuns had fashion codes. Even though they all wore habits, different orders had different veils, robe colors, and even belt lengths to signal status, age, and spiritual purity. Some are practically couture. One Benedictine convent even banned leather belts, because they were too luxurious. And here's the kicker. Some nuns still accessorized with little tokens, hidden embroidery, or rings from their pre-convent life tucked into hems. Holiness, apparently, had a loophole or two. But all this woven fabric and daily labor can't hide the truth simmering beneath the surface. Sister Hiltrude collapses during Nun, the afternoon prayer. One moment she's upright, the next she's slumped over, hands still locked in prayer position. There's panic. You're pushed aside as the older sisters crowd around her. Sister Rebecca scowls like someone broke a rule. The priest is summoned, not for medicine, but for absolution. She doesn't die. Not yet. But you notice that no one asks what caused it. You hear the word weakness whispered like a diagnosis. In the infirmary, you see she has bruises on her arms that don't look self-inflicted. This place eats you slowly. You get fewer hours of sleep than a soldier, more work than a farmer, and no say in your own fate. It's not just the labor. It's the subtle power dynamics. Who gets the warm water? Who eats first? Who's allowed to write verses in the margins of their psalter? It's the constant performance of submission and the quiet threat that everything you do is being watched, not just by God, but by the living. Every kindness might be a trap. Every silence might be a message. Scholars still argue about this. Were these power structures meant to enforce religious order or to maintain a social hierarchy that mirrored the world outside? Some historians insist convents gave women rare access to literacy and leadership. Others argue those privileges came with a leash, and stepping too far out of line meant spiritual and sometimes physical punishment. There's evidence for both. But as you lie in your cot that night, listening to a mouse chew through someone's sock under the floorboards, the truth feels closer to a prison with a stained glass window. As you drift off, a single candle still burns near the door. You catch the shape of Sister Avis leaning against the frame, watching the hallway. She's not supposed to be there, but she's not afraid. She turns slightly, and in the flicker of flame, you see the curve of a smile. It's not warm. It's not cruel. It's knowing. You start to wonder if the church thinks it owns these women. Why do so many of them look like they're planning something? The next morning, the fog is heavier. It sits in the cloister like unspoken guilt, soft and gray, muffling everything except the bells. Your robe is damp again because it never really dries, and your hands are cracked from cold water and lye soap. You barely recognize your own fingers anymore, thin and pink from scrubbing floors and stone steps. You're starting to look like them, hollow-eyed, quiet, pressed down by the weight of God, rules, and centuries of silence. You've made it to your third day when you learn about the dowry game. It's not discussed openly, of course. It slips in like a side comment, casual but sharp. Sister Cataline, while correcting your uneven parchment cuts, mutters, "You slice vellum like a girl who came with a half-dowry." You blink. She doesn't look up. Some come with gold. Some come with nothing. It determines how you're treated. If not by God, then certainly by us. That night, during supper, barley again, with a lone piece of carrot, you sit next to Sister Magdala, who seems to have declared you tolerable. She leans in, voice low. You don't know about the dowry tears. You shake your head. She grins. Of course not. You're still shiny. She counts on her fingers. Tier 1, rich girls. Full dowry, sometimes a bonus. Get the best beds, the soft robes, skip the grossest chores. Tier 2, partial dowry. Gets you treated fair if you don't make noise. Tier 3, no dowry. You're a mouth to feed, a burden. You'll spend most of your life in silence and cold. You stare down at your bowl. You never asked what your parents paid to put you here. You just remember the way your mother avoided your eyes the day you left. The truth begins to wrap around you like ivy. The hierarchy inside these walls mirrors the outside world. Nobility still wins. Wealth still talks. And God? God is more like wallpaper, a holy print over a very human power structure. The prayers are real, yes, the belief maybe, but underneath it all is strategy. The convent is a chessboard, and you're still figuring out if you're a pawn or something more dangerous. Here's a historical fact that hits like a cold slap. Many families use convents as parking lots for inconvenient daughters, especially noble ones. Inheritance laws meant only the eldest son got land and title. Marrying off every daughter was expensive and risky, A failed marriage could ruin alliances. But sticking a daughter behind a wall with a respectable dowry sealed the deal with God and society. It was neat, it was clean, and it made those daughters disappear. She chose the religious life, they'd say. In reality, most of them didn't choose anything at all. And what if they fought it? Sometimes they ran. But if they were caught, they'd be dragged back and punished, locked in stone cells, denied food, forbidden to speak for weeks. Some didn't survive. Some didn't care to. In the next days, you begin to notice the tells. The way some sisters flinch at raised voices, the quiet bruises, the names muttered in sleep. Sister Isabel, the one with the parchment voice, tells you in passing, we're not angels. We're just women who got stuck with halos. And then you meet Prioress Adele. She doesn't interact much with the novices, but today she appears during meal prep. Tall, bony, lips pursed like she's permanently holding in a scolding. Her eyes sweep the room and land on you. You, she says, come with me. You're led through a side corridor you haven't seen before, walls hung with tapestries of saints, so faded they look like ghosts. Adele walks fast. You don't ask questions. Eventually, you reach a chamber with a high window and a locked cabinet. There, she opens a leather-bound register. Names, dates, lines of Latin. She hands you a quill. You'll copy the entries from this week. Carefully. As you write, your hand aching, she watches. After a while, she speaks. Do you know why we track the purity of bodies? You pause, look up. She narrows her eyes. Because a chaste woman is the church's finest treasure, untouched, unblemished. She lets the words hang. And if she falls, she becomes a liability. You nod slowly, returning to the register. She adds, more softly, your hymen is worth more than your voice. And then, with a shrug, that's just the truth. There's something broken in that logic, but you're not brave enough yet to say it out loud. Here's your quirky detail for this one. Some medieval convents performed literal virginity tests before women could take final vows. No joke. The church would send midwives or matrons to physically inspect a girl's body to ensure she was pure. This was invasive, humiliating, and obviously unreliable, especially since the entire test was based on flawed biology and cultural myth. But in a world where your body was a bargaining chip, everyone wanted a receipt. A week in, you start waking up in the middle of the night with the bells in your head. You're adjusting, but also fraying. The days blur into a cycle of cold and silence, but the evenings hum with something else. You start to notice that after Compline, not everyone goes straight to sleep. Some sisters linger in the dark corners of the cloister. Some whisper. You even catch Sister Joan, yes, that Joan, slipping out of the dormitory barefoot and vanishing into the scriptorium wing long after everyone else has lain down. You follow her once, just enough to see a flicker of candlelight behind the parchment room door. She's not alone. You don't recognize the other figure. They're speaking too softly to hear. Back in your cot, you think about the layers of this place, the rituals, the whispers, the judgment. You wonder how many of the women here are actually living their vows and how many are just surviving them. There's a scholar somewhere in Oxford or maybe Bologna who once called medieval convents the first corporations for women, structured, hierarchical, regulated by rules and bylaws. But unlike modern companies, these didn't just profit from your labor. They owned your time, your voice, your thoughts, your body. You start wondering what would happen if you broke the rules. If you said no. If you left. You already know the answer, but you're starting to wonder if someone else has already tried. The first time you hear the phrase body of Christ, used with a smirk, it's Sister Magdala again. She says it during evening laundry, standing hip-deep in a freezing stone basin, her hands red and raw as she slaps a tunic against a flatboard. They say we're brides of Christ, she says under her breath, glancing around. But he never shows up on the wedding night, does he? She grins sideways, teeth sharp in the dim torchlight. The other sisters don't laugh. They don't even look up. But you catch the tension in their hunched shoulders. They heard. They always hear. And someone will repeat it later when it's safer. Magdala spits in the water. Virginity, she mutters, like it's something you keep in a jar. You don't respond, not because you disagree, but because you don't yet know how much truth you're allowed to think, let alone speak. It's around this time that the phrase Virgo intacta starts floating through your days like an uninvited guest. You hear it from Sister Cataline in the scriptorium, from the abbess when she's counseling a nervous novice who might be showing a bit too much stomach during chores, and once from a visiting friar during a homily on moral fortitude, his eyes lingering a beat too long on the line of kneeling girls. You start realizing how obsessed the church is with what's between your legs, and, more importantly, with its staying unused. Entire theological frameworks rest on the idea that a woman's virtue is directly tied to her sexuality or lack thereof. A virgin? You're holy. A widow? You're suspicious. A woman who's never married but doesn't live in a convent? You're a walking scandal. The strange part is how often that obsession turns bizarre. One of the nuns, Sister Blandina, tells you during needlework that a bishop once asked her, very seriously, whether she'd ever felt temptation in her dreams. I said yes, she says with a dry chuckle, because I wanted to see his face. You ask what he did. She grins. He gave me 3 extra prayers and wouldn't look me in the eye again. There's a darker edge to the virginity politics, though. You learn that some girls, very young ones, are denied entrance to the convent until their purity can be verified. Inspections, whispered like the word execution. Sometimes it's as simple as a matron lifting a skirt. Sometimes it's not. You hear of one novice who arrived bleeding after a journey with a male escort. Her acceptance was delayed 3 months while church officials argued whether her body had been compromised. No one ever asked what happened to the escort. It all builds to something both absurd and deeply disturbing. Virginity is treated as a tangible, measurable, almost physical object, something that can be held, confirmed, possessed. And once it's lost, you're not just less holy, you're less valuable. Literally, your dowry is worth less. Your chances of taking final vows drop. You become a risk. Here's the quirky detail for this section. Brace yourself. Some medieval theologians argued that the Virgin Mary remained physically intact even after giving birth. No tearing, no blood, not even labor pains. This belief, that her hymen stayed miraculously whole, was debated for centuries. Entire treatises were written on it. It became an actual point of doctrine meant to underline her perpetual virginity. If the church was this obsessed with a divine vagina, it's no wonder regular women didn't stand a chance. But back in the convent, you start seeing the small rebellions against this madness. One day, during lessons with Sister Avis, yes, she's taken you under her wing. You're copying Psalms into a rough workbook, and she slides you a different page. It's not scripture. It's poetry, soft, aching, sharp. It reads like a confession, but not the kind you'd give to a priest. It's about touch, about longing, about hunger, but not for food or righteousness. It's written by a nun years ago, a name signed at the bottom in faded ink, one you've never heard. You look up. Avis just shrugs. We preserve what we can. You begin to realize that not every sister here is defeated. Some have found ways to carve out spaces for themselves, in art, in words, in whispered memory. And some have even found closeness. Not all the attachments here are sisterly in the way the abbess would approve. You start to see it in the looks passed during prayer, in the way certain pairs of nuns always sit beside each other, how one lingers a moment too long helping another wash her feet. This opens up another question, one scholars still argue over today. Were these emotional and physical relationships among nuns romantic, sexual, spiritual, or all of the above? There are records of love letters between sisters, of poems that drip with longing, of accounts that speak quietly of touch. Some historians believe these relationships were purely platonic expressions of deep spiritual connection. Others say they were very much romantic and very much physical, just hidden behind the cloister walls and the Latin prayers. There's a term you'll learn later, particular friendship. It was the church's polite way of describing those intense, exclusive bonds between women in religious life. The kind of relationship that made superiors nervous, the kind that, if discovered, could lead to forced separation, confession, or punishment, but also the kind that kept some women sane in a place that constantly demanded silence and submission. That night, you watch as Sister Joan passes Sister Clarice a folded scrap of parchment in the corridor. They don't speak. Joan keeps walking. Clarice tucks it into her sleeve without looking. You feel the secret of it like a hum in the air. You're beginning to understand that the convent isn't just a prison. It's also a theater, a place where every woman wears a role: nun, novice, prioress, penitent. But behind those parts, there are stories they won't put in registers. There are truths they whisper only to each other or hide in ink. Your own role right now is the quiet one, the one who listens, watches, nods at the right time. But inside, you're building something, a map of names, looks, silences. And at the center of it is a question you can't shake. What happens to a woman who stops pretending? You start noticing the sounds, not the bells. You've adjusted to those. No, it's the quieter things, the soft sighs in the dark after Compline, the subtle creak of floorboards when someone's walking where they shouldn't be, the rustle of parchment when it's not prayer time. There's a rhythm to life here, yes, but under it runs a different current, a hidden cadence. You're beginning to move in sync with that one, the rhythm of secrets. It's a few weeks in when the nights start getting longer. Winter is settling over the convent, and you're waking up with frost on your blanket's edge. No one talks about it, but everyone moves slower, clutches their robes tighter. The chapel is colder than it should be. You swear the crucifix over the altar looks more judgmental when you're shivering. You've developed the habit of tucking your hands under your arms during prayer just to feel your own warmth. It's not dignified, but dignity is a luxury here. You spend more and more time with Sister Avis now. She doesn't ask why you're drawn to her, and you don't ask why she seems to know more than anyone else. She shows you the hidden spots of the convent, alcoves behind the cloister garden, a forgotten stairwell that leads nowhere, a loose stone behind the statue of St. Margaret where girls used to hide contraband. You begin to understand that every inch of this place holds stories buried beneath layers of ash and incense. It's during one of these whispered explorations that she tells you about the night whispers. There's a tradition, she says, crouched beside you in a dark corridor behind the novice dormitory. After Compline, after lights out, some sisters talk in code. Murmurs, questions, prayers twisted into confessions. It's how truths survive. You ask if she's ever spoken them. She gives a half-smile. Once, maybe twice. But mostly I listen. That night, back in your cot, you keep your ears open. And sure enough, there it is, a whisper, then another. Names, fragments. She said the priest touched. No, behind the scriptorium, they found it under her pillow. It's not constant, just scattered like leaves stirred by wind. You lie still, pretending to sleep while your mind races, catching phrases and piecing together rumors that feel more real than anything you've been taught here. One voice mentions Sister Agnella. You remember her, young, maybe 15, quiet, with a permanent look of confusion, like she was always halfway into a thought. She hasn't been around for a few days. The official word is that she was sent to the infirmary with nerves. But the whispers say otherwise, that she was found in tears after confession, that she tried to run, that she might be locked in the cellar. You want to ask Avis, but you know she'll only tell you what she thinks you're ready to hear. So instead, you wait, watch, take your time. In the meantime, something else is brewing. One morning during chores, you're in the kitchen helping Sister Mirabelle chop onions when she pauses, knife still in hand, and says softly, "You know they're watching how close we get." You blink, surprised. She nods toward a nearby doorway. Not them, she clarifies. The ones who send letters. Inspectors. Outside eyes. Churchmen. She smiles faintly. They worry about us getting too fond of each other. It takes you a moment to understand, then you do. You've started seeing it, too. The way two sisters linger a moment longer during prayers, the comfort of a hand brushing another's back as they pass. It's quiet, careful, intimate, but not all of it's innocent. Or if it is, it's innocent in the way a secret kiss is innocent, brief, stolen, dangerous. Late one night, you pass by the garden and see Sister Joan sitting in the moonlight, not alone. Sister Clarice is with her, their heads bent together. There's nothing overt, just stillness. But the air feels heavy around them, as if the moment is holding its breath. You slip away unnoticed, your heart thudding louder than your footsteps. That night, you lie awake wondering what rules are real and which ones are only enforced when convenient. Who decided holiness and loneliness had to be synonyms? And what does it mean that some sisters seem to find comfort in each other in ways the Church refuses to name? Here's your fringe fact of the day. In the 14th century, an Italian bishop launched a full investigation into improper attachments among nuns in his region. He believed these excessive affections were undermining the sacred nature of the convent. His report included testimonies, many probably coerced, about shared beds, passionate letters, and secret kisses. His solution? More isolation, less talking, more punishment. Because clearly, if two women cared for each other, it had to be the devil's work. But not all officials reacted that way. Some turned a blind eye. Some, disturbingly, were too busy taking advantage of their own access to nuns. It was safer to accuse women of weakness than to question priest behavior, sparking debate. Were convents prisons or refuges? For some, both, a place to read, learn, write, find listeners, at great risk. You're part of a lineage of survival, not just faith. Every whispered word, hidden letter, forbidden glance fuels a quiet rebellion. Some rules, the sisters sense, are meant to bend. You keep notes, scraps in your psalter. She touches her shoulder like it's the last thing she'll ever hold. The truth hides in silence better than prayer. Sacred, though not scripture. It begins with a found love letter, tucked behind a cloister stone, water-stained, thumbprint blurred but readable. Addressed to my beloved sister. It speaks of shared nights, fear, longing, a promise. I press your hand. Even now it ends. Though apart, you know what this is. Rumors become truths, passed silently. Relationships, emotional, physical, hidden, thrive. Sister Joan and Clarice, perhaps. Sister Mirabelle's aching glance at Avis. You could report the letter, hide it, burn it. Instead, you return it to its crevice. That night, you dream of secret flames, waking with heat behind your ribs. Routines persist. Prayer, chores, cold bread, thin broth. The abbess lectures on discipline. You think of the letter's ink. Sister Joan's saintly gaze might be acting. Magdala, humming in a laundry, advises subtlety in love, like a shadow or whisper. She tells of Sister Clements, who carve a nun's name in her cot, scrub floors silently for a month, smiling, her secret intact. Historically, the church buried female intimacy in euphemism. Bishops might separate, surveil, or expel nuns for irregular bonds, unsure how to handle them. Peter Abelard called such friendships the devil's mockery, tinged with jealousy. Scholars debate, were these bonds sexual or emotional? Letters, poems, trial records suggest love breathed despite oppression. Avis shows you a forgotten room above the refectory, once a novice's writing space. Scratched messages, faded notes, a charcoal sentence. My soul is mine, even if my body is not. She admits to loving someone here, touching the wall in memory. You see sisters as people, tired, complicated, some suffering, some rebelling, a few finding love. A parchment slides across your table. When I see you, I remember myself. Clarice's handwriting, her curling S's, betrays her. You linger after supper, sliding her a note. I remember you too. Her fingers brush yours in the hall, not accidentally. An understanding begins, a thread through prayers and bells. In a place erasing selfhood, she reminds you who you are. This is forbidden, ironic against Father Henry's homily on Christ's desire. Only holy desire is allowed, untouching, unsatisfying. Clarice drops lavender at your knee. Its scent is defiance. Some convents had private confessor doors, letting in more than prayers, letters, gossip bodies. Court records note secret children, escape attempts. Your convent's door, found chasing a page, is silent, unlocked. You hear movement beyond, retreat. Avis says it's older than the chapel, still used. Later, you hear a male voice, coaxing, not scriptural. Sister Agnes vanishes from breakfast. You hold two secrets. One with Clarice, one behind that door. Routines drone on, but your mind seeks escape, a quieter world. You and Clarice exchange marginal notes, words, dates, bent hymns, giddy yet guilty. The church makes tenderness treason. You wonder, is this wrong or just forbidden? Clarice feels sacred. Scholars ask if nuns' bonds were sinful or inconvenient. Letters from the 12th to 13th centuries, like sonnets, suggest erased love stories. You leave Clarice a lavender-stitched fabric scrap under a kneeler. Her glance says, I saw. You feel free. Screaming wakes you, raw, primal. Sisters stir, footsteps rush, the abbess summoned. The abbess delays prayer, speaking of cleansing. Rumors boil. A novice, Adelina, gave birth, smothered the baby, hid it in the oven. Magdala's hands shake. The abbess calls it an abomination. Adelina, quiet from Normandy, is gone, as is Heloise, her companion. Avis says Adelina had no choice, no protection. If a priest, his name stays hidden. Nuns bore the blame, lapsus a fall. History records nuns pregnant by priests, punished harshly, while men were reassigned. Infants were hidden in ovens, cellars. The convent fasts for purification. Clarice, hollow-eyed, heard Adelina's breathing change but stayed silent. You take her hand. You're not alone. Winter thickens, the abbess sharper, confession mandatory. Clarice is reassigned beside Rebecca, the abbess's enforcer. You're sent to the infirmary. There, Sister Wolfhilda, older in presence, tends the sick with a fox pendant and non-Latin chants. She grinds yarrow for unnamed bleeding, her shells holding herbs, some ruined, like mandrake. A healer trained by a wise woman, she smirks at the churches which label. Before witch hunts, convents had herbalists, their knowledge whispered, relied on until condemned. Wolfhilda speaks of sisters healing with old deities' names, Brigid, Aona, Freya. We believe what we need to survive, she says. Sister Marretta, healed, thanks her silently. Healing happens beneath rituals, dangerous if discovered. You help in Wolfhilda's secret garden, learning mugwort, skullcap, lady's mantle. Clarice joins, pulling weeds. I thought I'd lost you, she says. She tucks rue into your sleeve, protection. These secrets are for survival, rebellion. Scholars debate if such knowledge was resistance or necessity. Feverfew in your hands feels defiant. During Vespers, Avis slips out. You follow into the biting wind. She opens a tunnel behind a storage house stone. Not far, but far enough, she says. It leads to a chamber with Brother Aldrich, a former monk, offering mulled wine. He left to question freely. Avis returned for those like you. A loose network moves through tunnels, sharing food, ideas, books, cracks in the wall. Not rebellion, but another way. Here's the rewritten version with timestamps removed, maintaining the immersive narrative and historical details in a cohesive flow. Small acts of refusal pass quietly like seeds. Avis and Aldrich talk late into the night about texts you've never heard of, early Christian mystics, heretical writings, visions suppressed by Rome. They say Christ spoke in parables for a reason. They say not all saints were celibate. They say the church has never been afraid of sin. It's afraid of autonomy. And that's when the story of the nun who ran begins. Her name was Ejifu, whispered like a legend in these secret corners. She was a sister at another convent, maybe in York, until she vanished. They say she escaped dressed as a monk. Some claim she was in love. Others say she had visions no one believed. The church put out notices for her, branded her an apostate, lost. But Avis says she isn't lost. I met her once, she says. She lives near the coast now, helps women who've been cast out or who choose to walk away. You're stunned. She survived. She thrived. Here's the fringe historical gem for tonight. Nun runaways weren't rare. There are actual recorded cases, some in church records, others in legal complaints, of women who left convents, disguised themselves, married, ran taverns, even joined pirate crews. One fled with a priest and opened a small school in secret. Some are caught and dragged back. Some are never found. One was excommunicated and canonized years apart. The line between heresy and sainthood is paper thin. You spend the night in that hidden room, not sleeping, listening, learning, thinking. When you finally return to the convent, just before Matins, you slip through the panel behind the garden. No one sees you. Or maybe they do and choose not to care. That day, you look at everything differently. The way the abbess preaches about obedience like it's oxygen. The way Sister Rebecca sharpens her gaze on the young novices like she's expecting betrayal. The way Clarice carries her small secrets so carefully, like fragile glass. You catch her in the hallway after supper and tell her softly, there's more outside the wall. She stares at you, then, to your surprise, nods. I know, she says. You don't ask what she means. You're starting to understand that all of you, Clarice, Avis, even Sister Wolfhilda, are linked not by rules, but by refusal. You're nuns? Yes, but you're also something else. Women who've seen the edge of the page and chosen to keep reading. The abbess will never know what was whispered behind the wall tonight. And if she ever finds out, you'll know how to disappear. It's strange how easily sin becomes currency. You start to notice it slowly, like mold creeping along the edge of a page. It begins in confession. Father Henry, seated in the claustrophobic wooden booth in the chapel's south transept, beckons each sister one by one. You kneel, you speak, you confess. That's how it's supposed to work. But over time, you realize he doesn't listen like a priest. He listens like a collector, filing every word away, not for your redemption, but for his own quiet vault. You see it in how he lingers too long in the confessional with the younger sisters, how his voice softens when he addresses the noble-born ones, how he eyes Sister Clarice after she leaves the booth, as if he knows something he shouldn't, something she never meant to give. You ask her one evening in the garden if everything's all right. She hesitates. He asked about you, she finally says. He wanted to know if we speak, if we're close. You stiffen. What did you say? I lied. The next day, you're summoned to confession. No surprise. You kneel, heart thudding like a drum in your throat. The air smells of old incense and oiled wood. The grill between you and Father Henry seems too thin. You can hear his breath. You wonder if he can hear yours. Daughter, he begins, you've been quiet lately. Are you hiding anything? You murmur the usual, impatience, wandering thoughts during prayer, envy. There's a pause. An affection, he asks. Have you felt any inappropriate affection for your sisters? You freeze. It's not subtle, not even a little. No, you say carefully. Silence. Because it's important to be truthful, he says, voice lower now. Some sins fester in darkness. You leave that booth with a chill that no woolen robe can fix. That night, you find Sister Avis in the scriptorium copying a hagiography with such precision it might as well be a spell. She doesn't look up when you sit beside her. He's starting to probe, you say. She nods. He always does when he's bored. And then she says something that sticks. The confessional is a stage. You just have to learn how to give a convincing performance. It dawns on you. Some sisters treat confession like a game, not out of disrespect, but self-preservation. They craft sins that sound just guilty enough to satisfy the priest, but harmless enough to keep him from digging deeper. I was prideful. I envied Sister Joan's singing voice. I doubted during matins. These are safe sins, acceptable ones, the kind that buy you privacy for another week. But slip even slightly, and your soul becomes leverage. Because that's what Father Henry does. He trades in guilt. He stores it like treasure. And sometimes he uses it. You overhear him in the corridor one afternoon, speaking with the abbess. His voice is quiet, but the word inappropriate cuts through like a dagger. You see Sister Ida walk past minutes later, pale, trembling. She's reassigned that evening, sent to the cellar to scrub floors and copy penitential psalms by candlelight. You never see her speak freely again. This is how power works here. The abbess uses guilt like mortar. Sister Rebecca wields obedience like a sword. Even Sister Joan, privileged and poised, knows how to twist silence into advantage. One word from her, one tilt of the head, and another novice gets extra chores or loses her writing privileges for a week. You begin to understand that in this place, piety is performative. Confession is currency. And virtue? Virtue is just a convenient disguise for control. Here's your unsettling historical fact of the day. Some medieval confessors were trained not just to absolve sin, but to extract it. They were given manuals, literal playbooks, that listed categories of sin and suggested how to question penitents about them. Ask if she has touched herself. Ask if she has lain beside another. Ask if her thoughts during prayer have wandered to the flesh. These weren't guesses, they were scripts. And women, especially nuns, were expected to answer in detail. Sometimes, the questioning itself was the sin. There's a scholar who argues that medieval confession booths functioned as the first psychological surveillance chambers, a place where women's thoughts, dreams, even their imagined desires could be weaponized against them. No action required. Just thinking the wrong thing could get you branded impure. You start keeping your real thoughts to yourself, not in your psalter, not in notes to Clarice. You bury them deep, where neither priest nor parchment can find them. Your sin, if it even is sin, belongs to you. One afternoon, you're stopped in the hallway by Father Henry. He smiles too gently. "Daughter," he says, "I sense restlessness in you. Perhaps we should schedule a private session." You smile back, the way you've practiced. "Thank you, Father. I will reflect on my need for guidance." Then you walk away. That night, you meet Clarice behind the old laundry house. She holds your hand in the dark and tells you about her dream, a dream where you both live by the sea, growing herbs and reading psalms without Latin or permission. No walls, no bells, just wind and salt and the sound of your own name spoken without fear. You believe in that dream now, not as a fantasy, but as a goal. For now, you play the game. In your next confession, you say, "I coveted Sister Wolfhilda's apothecary skills. I felt pride when I remembered a psalm no one else could. I doubted the abbess's wisdom for a moment." The penance is light, the door opens, and you keep your real secrets folded like a letter behind your heart. You wake in the early hours to the sound of breathing, not the rhythmic rise and fall of sleep, but sharp, jagged gulps, like someone trying not to drown. You sit up on your straw-filled mattress and strain to see in the chapel's faint ambient glow bleeding through the dormitory's slit windows. The noise is coming from Sister Beatrix's cot. She's hunched forward, wrapped in her blanket, arms clenched tight around herself. You think she's crying? You don't ask. No one does. The next morning, she's gone. At breakfast, the bowl meant for her sits untouched. Sister Rebecca says nothing. The abbess doesn't mention her absence during prayer. There's no explanation, no eulogy, not even a sideways glance. She's unpersoned, like she never existed. You ask Avis. She sighs and lowers her voice. She's having visions. You blink. Like dreams. No, the kind that happen when you're awake. You hear whispers about Beatrix over the next few days, that she began speaking aloud during prayer, that she said she saw flames dancing on the altar but felt no heat, that she claimed the Virgin came to her in the garden, barefoot and smiling, with blood on her palms. She said she was chosen. One sister tells you behind the dormitory latrine. She said she could feel God's breath behind her eyelids. Clarice tells you something else. She laughed during Compline, joy, or maybe terror. You finally learn she's being kept in the East Wing, in a solitary cell that used to hold broken tools and rotting manuscripts. Now it holds her. You beg Avis to take you there. She does after dark. The door is wood, reinforced with iron bands. There's a small opening at eye level, just large enough to pass a spoon or peer inside. You kneel and look. Beatrix is sitting on the floor, filthy, shivering, humming to herself in a broken cadence. Her lips move silently. Her fingers twitch in a pattern, like counting or keeping rhythm with something you can't hear. She doesn't notice you watching. Or maybe she does and just doesn't care. She hasn't eaten in 2 days, Avis says beside you. She claims food is earthly, that she's fasting to stay near the angels. She looks sick or touched by the divine. It depends who's watching. And this is where things get complicated. Because medieval convents didn't always know what to do with women like Beatrix, women who claimed to see God, speak with saints, or experience ecstasy during prayer. If the visions were poetic, church-friendly, and reinforced doctrine, you got declared a mystic, a living miracle, sometimes even a saint. But if your visions were messy, unpredictable, or spoke against authority, then you were mad, or worse, possessed. Beatrix's fate, as Avis explains, hangs in the balance of interpretation. She said nothing blasphemous yet. But if she does, if she contradicts scripture or questions authority, they'll call in an exorcist. They'll tie her down. They might even bleed her. Here's your historical twist of the night. Bleeding was a common medieval treatment for women believed to be possessed or mentally unwell. Leeching, cutting, purging, the idea being to release the bad humors. In convents, though, it was sometimes more symbolic, a way of purifying a woman who'd strayed too far from silence. You begin visiting Beatrix in secret, slipping her crusts of bread, whispering psalms through the slit. One night, she finally speaks back. They don't hear him, she says softly, but he's louder than the bells. You don't know if she means God or something else. Another night, she asks, have you ever felt your bones hum when you're alone? You lie and say yes, just so she feels less alone. You ask Wolfhilda what she thinks. The old healer snorts. Visions? Most likely she's starving and sleep-deprived. She spends 12 hours in prayer and hasn't bled in months. That'll make a girl see saints. But what if she's telling the truth? Wolfhilda shrugs. The church doesn't care about truth, just about control. It's not that visions were unheard of. Women like Hildegard of Bingen claimed divine revelations and were celebrated for it. But they had connections, male protectors, powerful patrons. Beatrix has none of that. She has you, Avis, maybe Clarice, but no one with a bishop's ear. You wonder what would happen if Beatrix did start speaking against the abbess. If she claimed her visions said the convent was corrupted, that the priest was tainted, that the Virgin herself weeps at the lies spoken in God's name. You don't wonder for long. 3 nights later, you hear it. She screams during matins, loud, clear, words ringing through the cold stone chapel like thunder. She sits on the altar like a queen, but her heart is full of ash. He wears the stole of a priest, but drinks poison with every breath. It's chaos. Sisters panic. The abbess turns purple. Father Henry bolts from his chair, robe flapping. Rebecca grabs you by the arm, yanking you back. Beatrix doesn't resist as they drag her away. She's smiling. That's the last time you see her. The next day, the abbess announces that Sister Beatrix has been sent to a nearby abbey for treatment. No one asks where. No one asks when she'll return. But Avis tells you later, they're bleeding her. Mark my words. And just like that, she's gone, removed, discredited. You can still hear her voice echoing in your head. Not the scream, but the quiet murmur. They don't hear him, but he's louder than the bells. You begin to understand that truth here isn't measured in clarity. It's measured in silence. You don't believe in miracles. Not in the clean, polished way they're carved into church walls. Not in the saints levitate and smile through pain kind of way. But a few weeks after Beatrix disappears, you witness something that makes you question whether faith is as tidy or as fake as you thought. It starts with Sister Agnes. She's one of the younger nuns, barely 18, all sharp cheekbones and hollow eyes. She's quiet, obedient, the kind that blends into pews and prayer lines, too soft-spoken to ever stir suspicion. That's probably why it happens to her. She's invisible. She's perfect, and perfect is fertile ground for drama. One morning during matins, Agnes collapses, not just a faint. She drops like a felled tree, arms out, face pale as parchment, eyes rolled back. It happens mid-prayer, right between Dominus Vobiscum and Et cum Spiritu. Sisters rush to her side. The chapel shudders with confusion, and for once, even the abbess looks unprepared. Then Agnes opens her mouth and begins to sing. But it's not the hymn. It's not Latin. It's something else entirely. High, eerie, haunting, like Gregorian chant melted into birdsong and distant thunder. It doesn't sound human. It doesn't stop. Her body stays limp on the stone, arms outstretched like a crucifix, eyes wide but unseeing. The sound climbs, spirals, folds into itself like a cathedral collapsing in slow motion. It's awful. It's beautiful. When it finally stops, she breathes once, raggedly, and faints for real this time. They carry her out, and by dinner, everyone's talking. The official line is that she's been touched by grace. The abbess declares it publicly, a manifestation of divine ecstasy, she calls it, as if she's thrilled to have a spectacle to parade. You almost laugh. The woman who banished Beatrix for visions is now blessing Agnes for her outburst. She bled, Clarice whispers to you that night. Not from her hands, from her side. They said it was the stigmata. You can't help but roll your eyes. You believe that? Clarice shrugs. I don't know what I believe, but she looked different. And that's the thing. You see her the next day, sitting in the cloister garden, swaddled in extra shawls, and she does look different. Not holy, not radiant, but changed, hollowed out, maybe, or stretched thin like wax after a candle's been burned down to nothing. She doesn't speak to anyone. She doesn't return to her chores. She sits. She watches. Sometimes she murmurs to herself, too soft to catch. Once, you swear she stares at the statue of Saint Barbara for nearly an hour without blinking. Here's a historical gut punch for tonight. Medieval convents loved a bleeding saint. There are dozens of documented cases of nuns developing wounds that mimicked Christ's crucifixion, bleeding palms, pierced sides, thorn-like markings on the forehead. Some of these cases were likely self-inflicted, others possibly psychosomatic. A few are still debated. But when it happened, the church noticed, especially if it drew pilgrims, because that's the other side of these miracles. They brought attention and money. Within 3 days, word spreads beyond the convent. A merchant's wife shows up with her sick child, then a farmer whose crops failed. They all want to see the girl who sang with the angels. The abbess doesn't stop them. She tells them to wait in the chapel, tells Sister Agnes to sit quietly near the altar for short intervals, dressed in white, veiled, glowing in the candlelight. They don't say it aloud, but everyone knows what's happening. The abbess has a relic now, a living one, and she's cashing in. She's sick, Wolfhilda mutters as she packs a poultice. Probably hallucinating. She needs sleep, not strangers kneeling at her feet. But no one listens to Wolfhilda. She's useful when you've got a boil or a twisted ankle, but no one wants her opinion on divine matters. She smells too much like mugwort to be holy. And Agnes? She doesn't fight it. She sits where they place her. She smiles when the abbess says smile. When asked to sing, she does, though the songs sound different now. More human, less miracle. The bleeding stops, but the pilgrims keep coming. You hear the money chest being opened more often. Coins clink in the hallway outside the abbess's quarters. Meanwhile, the rest of you get less bread. The entire convent begins to shift around Agnes. The chapel is cleaned more often. The sisters are reminded to keep their heads bowed. We are being watched, the abbess says. We are now the guardians of something sacred. Clarice mutters, more like the guardians of a gold mine. But there's something deeper, darker twisting under the surface. You catch Sister Joan whispering to Rebecca near the candle rack. She's faking it, Joan hisses. She bit her hand till it bled. I saw the mark. She's a liar, says another. I heard her humming when she thought no one could hear. The same sisters who once wept at Agnes's feet now pass her with narrowed eyes. Agnes is no longer a miracle. She's a threat, because power shifts when one sister becomes larger than the rest. And the convent, like any holy machine, doesn't tolerate imbalance for long. That's the twist in so many of these stories. Saints only stay saints as long as they're useful. There's one scholar, French probably, who argues that medieval holy women walked a knife's edge. Be too quiet, and you're forgotten. Be too loud, and you're heretical. Be just miraculous enough, and you're worshipped for a time. One evening, Agnes is found on the chapel floor again. This time, not singing. This time, she's unconscious. The abbess says she fainted from devotion. Wolfhilda says her pulse was erratic, says she'd been dosed with valerian for days to keep her docile. You believe Wolfhilda. After that, the pilgrims stop. The abbess says the miraculous season has passed. She stops asking Agnes to sit by the altar. Agnes goes back to copying psalms, slowly, as if she's learning her own hands again. No one speaks to her much. She's too holy, or too tainted, or too hard to look at. One night, you find her alone in the refectory. You sit. She stares at her bowl, untouched. I didn't lie, she says, almost to herself. You nod. But I also didn't know what I saw. Or why. You nod again. I thought it was God. But maybe it was just me. She finally eats. You sit with her until the candle burns out. And in that flickering silence, you think maybe miracles aren't about belief. Maybe they're about need. And right now, all anyone needs is to be heard. The bishop arrives unannounced. No letter, no warning bell, just a clatter of hooves in the cloister courtyard and a flash of red velvet trimming his robes as he dismounts with the flair of someone who expects people to kneel automatically. He's not young, but not ancient either. Somewhere in that comfortably middle age where authority and indulgence have already begun to curdle into a kind of smirking detachment. He has 2 attendants, both in darker robes, both watching everything as if this is a performance and they're here to decide who's out of tune. The abbess meets him with too much grace. Her voice is syrup, her bow a touch too low. She kisses his ring with theatrical solemnity, and he barely masks his pleasure. By nightfall, the convent is buzzing with tension. Floors are scrubbed raw. Altar cloths are changed twice. Psalters are rinsed. Even the dried wax around the candelabras is scraped away. It's like preparing a stage. And you, along with every other sister, are now an actor in a very delicate play. He's here for an inspection, officially a spiritual audit, they call it. A visit from the shepherd to ensure the flock is still safely fenced. Unofficially, he's here because of the singing, because of the blood, because someone whispered to someone in Rome that this convent might be sliding off the narrow path. And maybe, just maybe, because the church smells opportunity or scandal. Often both. You see him the next day during morning prayer. He sits in a special chair near the altar, flanked by his men, eyes moving slowly across the line of kneeling sisters. He doesn't look like a holy man. He looks like a merchant at market, inspecting fish for signs of rot. You wonder if he's ever prayed without an audience. Clarice squeezes your hand under the sleeve as you rise. Just once, just enough. Later, you're summoned with 5 other novices to speak with him in the chapter house. You're to reflect on your spiritual formation, which is code for we want to hear if you've seen anything useful. The room smells of cedar and dust. He sits behind a desk too large for the space, his ringed fingers steepled like a parody of piety. Do you feel loved by God? He asks. You nod. Are your sisters obedient? You nod again. Have you experienced any unusual disturbances in your sleep? Dreams, visions, temptations? You hesitate, only for a second, but he notices. His lips curl. You may speak freely. Nothing leaves this room. Which is, of course, a lie. So you say what he wants to hear, that the convent is orderly, that the abbess is fair, that the recent rumors were exaggerated by pilgrims seeking spectacle, that Sister Agnes has returned to her duties with appropriate humility, that the singing was beautiful, but nothing more than fervent prayer. He nods, as if you've passed a test. You leave the room sick with the weight of your own compliance. You find Avis that evening in the garden. She's digging in the earth, her fingers caked with soil. He's here to clean house, she says without looking up. You sit beside her and help pull weeds. How long will he stay? Long enough to find something, or enough nothing? Because that's what bishops do. They sniff for sin, and if they can't find it, they invent it. Here's your historical nugget for the night. Episcopal visitations like this one were a staple of medieval church governance. Bishops toured monasteries and convents, checking for doctrinal purity, moral integrity, and financial accountability. On paper, it was about protection. In practice, it was often about politics, power, and punishment. A bad report could shutter a convent. A glowing one might lead to more funding, more status. It all depended on what the bishop saw, or thought he saw, or was paid to see. In the days that follow, he questions others, Clarice, Wolfhilda, even the abbess herself. The convent moves like a body holding its breath. Meals are quieter, songs shorter, prayers sharper, as though God is suddenly listening more closely. Then, on the 5th night, something strange happens. You wake in the middle of the night to muffled footsteps, not the shuffling of a sister going to the privy, but faster, purposeful. Doors creak open. A voice murmurs something in Latin. Then a gasp. You slip out of bed and follow the noise, barefoot, through the cold halls. You find the source behind the scriptorium. The bishop, standing far too close to Sister Joan, one hand on her shoulder, his face composed in mock concern. You don't hear everything, but you catch the tone, coaxing. You see the way his thumb strokes her arm. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't move. When he sees you, his face doesn't change. He just raises a finger to his lips. You return to your bed like a ghost and don't sleep at all. The next morning, Sister Joan is promoted. She's assigned to assist the abbess directly, a privilege, a reward, or hush money. You whisper what you saw to Avis. She nods. He's not the first. He won't be the last. You wonder if anyone will say anything. You know they won't. Here's the fringe detail for this chapter. In a few rare cases, nuns did speak out. In 1326, in a French convent, several sisters wrote a collective letter accusing their visiting bishop of improper advances. They were silenced. Some were relocated, one vanished. The bishop was reassigned, upward. The lesson: the church loves purity in theory, but power always wins the argument. By the end of his visit, the bishop announces that the convent is in good standing. He praises the discipline, commends the abbess, declares Sister Agnes a child of deep grace, but warns against sensationalism. He departs with 2 chests of coin, 3 bottles of Wolfhilda's medicine, and the names of 3 sisters he intends to recommend for further training. Joan is one of them. She won't return. As the hooves fade into the distance, the abbess exhales visibly. "Back to order," she says. "But you know better. Order never left. It just wears different robes. They say Sister Agnes is possessed. Of course they do. It was only a matter of time. Too much attention, too much grace, too much silence after the bishop left. And now, with no more pilgrims to impress and no miracles to polish, she's gone from holy to haunted. Just like that. You hear the whispers first. She talks to shadows. She won't eat bread anymore. She's been seen standing in the snow barefoot, smiling. Sister Rebecca is the one who finally says the word aloud. Possessed. It's spoken in the chapter room like a diagnosis and a death sentence. She must be examined, Rebecca says, voice clipped and righteous. Her behavior has turned erratic, blasphemous. She claims to see the Virgin in the rafters. The abbess purses her lips. We will investigate quietly, discreetly. We are not animals. But you can see it in her eyes. This is an opportunity. A possessed nun is a problem, but an exorcised one? That's a redemption story. They move her to a separate cell. Not the East Wing this time, too close to where Beatrix once was. Instead, they place her in the old bell tower, empty now that the younger novices can't be trusted to climb the narrow stairs. It's dusty, cold, and full of spiders, appropriate, you suppose, for a soul the abbess once cleansed. You visit her in secret. You don't tell Clarice. You don't even tell Avis. You go alone after Compline, slipping into the tower with a wrapped piece of bread and a flask of warm milk. Small acts of refusal pass, quietly like seeds. Sister Avis and Sister Aldrich talk late into the night about forbidden texts, early Christian mystics, heretical writings, visions suppressed by Rome. They say Christ spoke in parables for a reason, that not all saints were celibate, that the church fears autonomy more than sin. Then comes the story of Ejifu, a nun who ran. Her name is whispered like a legend in the convent's secret corners. She was a sister at another convent, perhaps in York, until she vanished, escaping dressed as a monk. Some say she was in love. Others claim she had visions no one believed. The church branded her an apostate, lost. But Avis says she lives near the coast now, helping women who've been cast out or who choose to walk away. Ejifu survived. She thrived. Runaway nuns weren't rare. Church records and legal complaints document women who left convents, disguised themselves, married, ran taverns, or even joined pirate crews. One fled with a priest and opened a secret school. Some were caught and dragged back. Others were never found. One was excommunicated and later canonized. The line between heresy and sainthood was paper thin. You spend a night in a hidden room, not sleeping, listening, learning, thinking. Slipping back before Matins through a panel behind the garden, you wonder if anyone saw you, or if they did and chose not to care. That day, everything feels different. The abbess's sermons on obedience, Sister Rebecca's sharp gaze on the novices, Clarice's careful handling of her secrets. You tell Clarice softly in the hallway after supper, there's more outside the wall. She nods. I know. You're linked not by rules, but by refusal. Nuns, yes, but also women who've seen the edge of the page and keep reading. If the abbess ever finds out what was whispered tonight, you'll know how to disappear. Hashtag confession as currency. Sin becomes currency, creeping like mold along a page's edge. It begins in confession. Father Henry, in the claustrophobic wooden booth in the chapel's south transept, listens like a collector, not a priest, filing every word away for his own vault. He lingers too long with the younger sisters, softens his voice for the noble-born, eyes Clarice as if he knows something she never meant to give. He asked about you. Clarice tells you in the garden, admitting she lied to protect you. When you're summoned to confession, your heart thuds. The grill feels too thin. You hear his breath. You've been quiet lately, he says. Are you hiding anything? You offer safe sins, impatience, envy, wandering thoughts. Then he asks about inappropriate affection for your sisters. You freeze, deny it carefully, and leave with a chill no row can fix. Sister Avis, copying a hagiography in the scriptorium, tells you the confessional is a stage. Learn to perform. Some sisters craft harmless sins, pride, doubt, to buy privacy. But slip, and your soul becomes leverage. Father Henry trades in guilt, storing it like treasure, using it when it suits him. You overhear him with the abbess, the word inappropriate cutting through. Sister Ida, pale and trembling, is reassigned to the cellar soon after, silenced. The abbess uses guilt like mortar, Rebecca wields obedience like a sword, and even Sister Joan twists silence into advantage. Piety is performative. Confession is currency. Virtue is control's disguise. Medieval confessors were trained to extract sin, using manuals that listed questions to probe penitent's thoughts. Has she touched herself? Laying beside another. Women, especially nuns, answered in detail, and the questioning itself could be the sin. Scholars argue confession booths were psychological surveillance chambers, weaponizing women's thoughts against them. You bury your real thoughts deep, beyond priest or parchment. When Father Henry stops you, suggesting a private session, you smile practically, deflect, and walk away. That night, Clarice shares her dream by the laundry house. Living by the sea, growing herbs, reading psalms without permission. You believe in it as a goal. In your next confession, you offer safe sins, coveting Wolfhilda's skills, pride in a psalm, doubting the abbess. The penance is light, and your secrets stay folded behind your heart. You wake to jagged breathing, like someone trying not to drown. Sister Beatrix, hunched on her cot, arms clenched, is gone by morning. Her bowl sits untouched at breakfast. No one explains. Avis whispers, she's having visions when she's awake. Whispers grow. Beatrix spoke during prayer, saw flames on the altar, claimed the Virgin appeared with blood on her palms, said she was chosen. Clarice says she laughed during Compline, joy or terror. She's in a solitary East Wing cell, once for tools and rotting manuscripts. You visit with Avis after dark. Through a slit in the iron-banded door, Beatrix sits filthy, shivering, humming, her fingers twitching like counting. She hasn't eaten in 2 days, Avis says. She's fasting to stay near the angels. She looks sick or divine. Medieval convents struggled with women like Beatrix. Poetic, church-friendly visions could make you a mystic. Messy, defiant ones mark you as mad or possessed. Beatrix's fate depends on interpretation. If she speaks against authority, they'll call an exorcist, tie her down, bleed her. Bleeding, leeching, cutting, purging was used to purify possessed or unwell women, often symbolically in convents. You slip Beatrix bread, whisper psalms. One night, she murmurs, they don't hear him, but he's louder than the bells. Another, she asks if you felt your bones hum alone. You lie, saying yes, to ease her isolation. Wolfhilda snorts, she's starving, sleep-deprived. That'll make you see saints. But what if it's true? She shrugs. The church cares about control, not truth. Unlike Hildegard of Bingen, with her patrons, Beatrix has only you, Avis, maybe Clarice. You wonder what happens if she claims the convent is corrupt. You don't wonder long. During matins, she screams. She sits on the altar like a queen, but her heart is full of ash. She wears a priest's stole, but drinks poison with every breath. Chaos erupts. She's dragged away, smiling. The abbess says she's at another abbey for treatment. Avis says they're bleeding her. Her quiet murmur lingers. He's louder than the bells. Truth here is measured in silence. You don't believe in miracles, not the polished kind carved into church walls. But Sister Agnes, 18, quiet, invisible, makes you question. During matins, she collapses mid-prayer, arms out, eyes rolled back. Then she sings, not Latin, but something eerie, like chant mixed with birdsong and thunder. Her limp body lies cruciform, the sound spiraling, awful, beautiful. When it stops, she faints. The abbess calls it divine ecstasy. a stark contrast to Beatrix's banishment. Clarice whispers, she bled from her side, stigmata. You roll your eyes, but notice Agnes looks changed, hollowed out, stretched thin. The next day, she's in the cloister garden, swaddled, murmuring, staring at St. Barbara's statue. Pilgrims arrive, a merchant's wife, a farmer, seeking the girl who sang with angels. The abbess places Agnes near the altar, veiled in white, a living relic. Coins clink, the money chest opens often. You get less bread. Wolfhilda mutters, she's sick, hallucinating, needs sleep. But no one listens. She smells too much like mugwort to be holy. Agnes sings when asked, human now, not miraculous. The bleeding stops, but pilgrims keep coming. Nuns with wounds mimicking Christ's, bleeding palms, sides, drew pilgrims and money. Some cases were self-inflicted, others psychosomatic, some debated. Sisters turn on Agnes. Joan hisses, she bit her hand till it bled. Another heard her humming, not praying. Agnes is a threat. Power shifts when one sister rises. A French scholar says holy women walked a knife's edge, too quiet, forgotten, too loud, heretical, just miraculous enough, worshipped briefly. Agnes is found unconscious again. The abbess says devotion. Wolfhilda, says Valerian dosing. You believe Wolfhilda. Pilgrims stop. Agnes returns to copying psalms, avoided, too holy, too tainted. One night, she says, I didn't lie, but I didn't know what I saw. Maybe it was just me. You sit until the candle burns out. Miracles are about need, not belief. The bishop arrives unannounced, hoof clattering, red velvet robes flashing. Middle-aged, smirking, he's flanked by attendants watching like critics. The abbess kisses his ring with theatrical grace. The convent buzzes, floors scrubbed, altar cloths changed, wax scraped. It's a stage, and you're actors. Officially, it's a spiritual audit. Unofficially, it's about Agnes's singing, the blood, whispers of scandal or opportunity. He sits near the altar during prayer, inspecting like a merchant. Clarice squeezes your hand. You're summoned to the chapter house to reflect. His ringed fingers steeple. The room smells of cedar. Do you feel loved by God? Are your sisters obedient? Any dreams, visions, temptations? You hesitate. He notices. You lie. The convent is orderly. Agnes humbled. The singing just prayer. He nods. You leave, sick with compliance. Avis, digging in the garden, says, he's here to clean house. Bishops sniff for sin or invent it. Historical note. Episcopal visitations checked purity and finances, but were often political. A bad report could close a convent. A good one brought status. He questions Clarice, Wolfhilda, the abbess. Meals quiet, prayers sharpen. On the fifth night, you hear footsteps, a Latin murmur, a gasp. Behind the scriptorium, the bishop stands too close to Joan, stroking her arm. She doesn't move. He shushes you. Next morning, Joan's promoted to assist the abbess, reward or hush money. Avis says he's not the first. In 1326, French nuns accused a bishop of advances. They were silenced. He promoted. Power wins. The bishop praises the convent, commends Agnes, warns against sensationalism, and leaves with coins, Wolfhilda's medicine, and 3 sisters' names, including Joan's. She won't return. The abbess says, back to order. But order never left. Agnes is declared possessed. Too much grace. Too much silence post-bishop. Whispers say she talks to shadows, stands barefoot in snow, sees the Virgin in the rafters. Rebecca says, possessed, like a death sentence. The abbess promises a quiet investigation, but sees opportunity. An exorcised nun is a redemption story. Agnes is moved to the old bell tower, dusty and spider-filled. You visit alone after Compline with bread and milk, slipping into the narrative's end. Wolfhilda's silent warning speaks volumes as you visit Agnes in her bell tower cell. Curled in the corner, barefoot and frail, she stares at the wall before whispering, they want to burn it out of me. Sitting beside her, you ask what it is. Not a what, she says, her smile cold. Just noise a buzzing. Sometimes it speaks. Sometimes it's light. You ask if it's a demon. I don't know what demons feel like. This doesn't feel evil, just loud. You stay for hours, neither of you sleeping. You slip back before lauds, as the abbess prepares for an exorcism. Brother Matteo, a Franciscan, arrives with salt, holy water, and weary experience. Find the devil, drown in scripture, leave. Short, gray-bearded, his eyes are like polished marbles, never smiling. Sisters whisper of his past exorcisms, some awed, others fearful. You and Clarice watch from the chapel as preparations unfold. They're going to break her, Clarice murmurs. You stay silent, knowing she's right. The ritual takes place in the scriptorium, desks cleared, candles lit, prayer books in a semicircle. Novices are barred, but you hide behind a shelf, heart pounding. Agnes enters in white, wrists bound with soft cloth, symbolic, cruel. Her loose hair makes her ghostly. Brother Mattheo's Latin is sharp, rhythmic, like smoke. He splashes holy water. She flinches. He presses across to her forehead. She blinks. He demands the demon's name. Silence. He repeats. Nothing. Agnes speaks. There is no demon. Only pain. Only loneliness. Only silence. The abbess stiffens. I scream because no one would listen. The exorcism drags on. Agnes laughs softly, saying the Virgin wears red in winter, that Christ kissed her forehead in a dream, that the devil lives in their fear, not her body. Matteo declares her too far gone. Sedated, she's moved to the cellar beneath the refectory, damp and rotting. You beg the abbess for mercy. She says survival means purity. Avis, grim, tells you, she's not possessed, she's broken. The church doesn't know the difference. Medieval exorcisms often killed the possessed through exhaustion, injury, or starvation, or left them damaged. They weren't about saving souls but controlling them, labeling bold or inconvenient women as possessed. Clarice's note says Agnes isn't eating. Wolfhilda sneaks her a tonic disguised as wine. You visit once more. Agnes, barely conscious, whispers of snow in the chapel, the Virgin's hand, light from stone cracks, truth or delirium. You stay until the candle burns out, vowing she won't vanish, though the church tries. Reorganizing dusty scriptorium shelves, you find a leather-bound folio hidden behind commentaries. No title, just stained hide and a leather tie. Its looping, playful script mimics a psalter but twists into verses of hands, lips, and longing flesh, holy for feeling, not suffering. Illuminations show women lying side by side, hair interwoven, lips touching, a saint pierced with kisses, the Virgin cradling a woman as a lover. You shut it, hands shaking, and take it to Avis. I helped hide it, she says. Written by Sister Telesia, a poet and possible mystic, it's a love letter in verse. Her body is a chapel, her breath a psalm. You read, not sin but worship. Telesia was punished when a page was found, dying of pneumonia. Really exposure, left outside as an example. Historical note, nuns wrote erotic religious poetry, blending divine and sensual language. Scholars debate if it was metaphor or coded queer desire, like Hadwige of Antwerp's love letters to God. Telesia's work is direct. I, not Christ, not martyr, but woman, place my blessing where no priest may go. Overwhelmed, you think of Clarice's soft eyes, your close silences. In the laundry garden, you show her the manuscript. She traces the women's image, kisses you, certain brief. I see you, she says, and you breathe freely. You give a manuscript to Wolfhilda, who hides it beneath floorboards with her forbidden herbs. Powerful and dangerous, she says, smiling. You see the Psalms as poetry, robes as costumes, the confessional as a stage. The abbess paces, fearing something, age, change, or defiant women. Scholars argue nuns' erotic psalms were resistance against erasure. In a convent, every breath is political. Clarice's touch lingers, your verses grow. She waits like dawn behind a veil. Tucked in your psalter, there's survival, not scandal. A heavy gold coin, stamped with a worn lion or dragon, appears in the infirmary, then two more in the cloister garden, then a pouch of 7. The convent changes, more bread, thicker blankets, new jars for Wolfhilda, taller candles. Pilgrims return, seeking Wolfhilda's blessings for fertility, childbirth, or cures. The abbess, swayed by coins, allows it in a discreet eastern wing room. Wolfhilda murmurs half Latin, half older prayers, offering herbs or silence. Pilgrims leave coins. The abbess calls it charity. She's selling her difference, Avis says. Better her than a priest, Clarice counters. Convents were economies, selling blessings in masses. Wolfhilda's services grow. A noblewoman leaves smiling, rumors of lifted curses. One night, Wolfhilda shows you a bronze pendant, a female figure older than Christ, left for protection or fertility. Someone knows who I am, she says, unworried but watched by the abbess, who smiles but doesn't trust her. One night, a woman delivers a stillborn to Wolfhilda, who handles it silently. Her eyes are heavy next morning, but the convent stays quiet. Discretion is survival. Wolfhilda bends rules, holding real power, and the abbess takes notes. A missing spoon sparks it. When novice Theoda is struck for carelessness, the girls watch silently, passing her comfrey, braiding her hair, whispering differently. Small acts follow. Forgotten candles, upside-down psalter pages, pleated altar cloths. Mocking yes, sister replies. Avis says, they're waking up. Clarice calls it the quiet fuse. 14th century nun uprisings demanded better treatment or barricaded dormitories, risky and erased. The girls, inspired by you, Clarice and Wolfhilda, organized subtly, shorter veils, slower walks, hesitant bows. When Bernardetta is accused of stealing honey and refuses to confess, the novices sit awake all night, silent, waiting. She's spared, but Avis is targeted for inappropriate books, her text burned, reassigned to laundry, silenced. The chain holds, water, robes, bread appear at Avis's door. She tends herbs, forbidden but unstoppable. Control fades as belief wanes. Nuns wove coded embroidery, symbols, poems as truth. You find 3 crosses, one upside down, on your cuff and walk unbowed. They call it a trial, but it's theater. Sister Hildegard, awkward and quiet, is accused of stealing a cheap relic, St. Capollonia's tooth. The abbess calls it a spiritual breach, ordering a trial by ordeal, hot iron, supposedly banned but allowed. Ordeals tested guilt by carrying heated iron, clean healing men innocence, but God rarely protected. Clarice calls it barbaric, Wolfhilda theater, preparing salve. You clean the brazier, the pitted iron smelling of ash. In the courtyard, Hildegard walks 3 steps, skin smoking, stench unbearable, then collapses. Wolfhilda applies salve, muttering non-Latin words. The abbess declares God will judge in 3 days. Hildegard whispers, Sister Joan took it. I saw her. You tell Avis, this is about control, not truth. Her infected wounds mark her guilty, demoted to latrines, barred from communion. You read her gentle psalms nightly. Scholars say ordeals were social coercion, creating scapegoats for order. The convent quiets. Clarice pulls away, afraid, but you stay with Hildegard. A thick letter, sealed with blood-red wax, arrives via a courier who flees without rest. The abbess reads alone, her candle burning past midnight. She emerges drawn, silent. Wolfhilda whispers, it's from the Holy Office, a warning. Something has changed. A warning. Avis presses a scrap of cloth into your hand. Watch and keep quiet. That evening, you see Sister Rebecca slip into the abbess's chamber, unusual without a summons, carrying a linen-wrapped bundle. You think it's laundry until the edge flutters, revealing old, stained parchments, documents. After Compline, the abbess announces a spiritual review of the convent's texts. Anything not approved by Rome must be surrendered, no questions. Her clasped hands and tense shoulders betray fear, not of the sisters, but of something else. In the scriptorium, Avis sorts codices hurriedly. She whispers of something in the archives the church wants erased, a letter signed by a former pope who visited decades ago, not for prayer. She's shaking, hands you a crudely stitched bundle, too new for scripture, too old for current sisters. Hide this, she says. You tuck it under your robe, hide it in the garden's pear tree hollow, wrapped in oilskin. Later, you read it, a confession from Sister Elodia 2 generations ago about a pope's visit that became more than symbolic. He stayed a week, spoke to a few sisters. One became pregnant. The abbess then silenced it, baptized the child secretly, claimed it died. Elodia insists it lived, was taken, and its bloodline continued. Historically, while popes were officially celibate, some, like Alexander VI, had acknowledged children, others kept secrets. A 13th-century pope was suspected of fathering a child with a nun in a French convent. The accusation buried, the convent dissolved. Elodia's letter, dated just after, aligns with this. You show it to Clarice, her hands trembling. The abbess knows, you say. She's the line. Clarice laughs. What is she guarding? This place or herself? It reframes the abbess's fear, her control, her protectiveness over Sister Joan, who might have known too much. Wolfhilda, exhaling slowly, says if the child survived, a nun with papal blood would wield dangerous power, a heresy too risky to record. Clarice whispers that night, "What if it's you?" You laugh it off, but sleep eludes you. Sister Magdala is quietly removed from duties, no explanation. You feel something ancient building. You move the letter to the chapel, beneath St. Barbara's statue, patron of the trapped, in her hollow base. Let the saints keep secrets. The abbess grows paler, meeting Father Henri behind closed doors, repeating purge. The letter from Rome fades from mention, but you know bloodlines don't vanish. They coil underground. You're thrown into the reflection cell for asking loudly why Magdala was removed, your directness deemed unladylike. The damp, narrow cellar, once a wine storage, has a slit for light and mildewed straw. No blanket, no candle, just your heartbeat. You're told to pray without books. Isolation is the true punishment. Scratch marks on the walls, a repeated circle, show others need to be seen. You had a small V4 voice with a brick shard. Bells blur time. Thoughts mark its passage. You think of Clarice's touch, Wolfhilda's herbs, the abbess's stone-like eyes. Dreams haunt you. An overturned altar, Sister Agnes with an ash baby, parchment wings rooting you to the convent roof. Footsteps come, lighter than Rebecca's. Clarice slips in with warm bread and watered wine, risking much. They're watching everything, she whispers. She copied the letter, anticipating your punishment. Magdala knew something, she adds. Her kiss on your forehead is soft. She leaves. Wolfhilda visits next, wordlessly giving a vial of lavender and valerian for sleep. On the 5th day, Rebecca releases you, lips tight, eyes averted. In the chapel, the abbess searches for defiance. You give none. You're not invincible, she says. You bow, but your sister's whispers in your absence have fortified you. New carvings appear, sanguis loquitur. The blood speaks. Lavender braids the altar cloth. A goddess's double loop is sewn into the abbess's cushion. Clarice's note at Vespers reads, "We're ready." Did resisting nuns see themselves as rebels or faithful preservers of truth? The debate lingers. The priest locks the tabernacle nightly, no longer a symbol of openness. The abbess sleeps with a dagger, seen by Avis. She's afraid. Avis says, of women with teeth. A parchment nailed to the gate reads, the child's name was Clara. The bishop returns with 2 inquisitors, disguised as monks, one tall with sharp teeth, the other. System, other with a quiet menace. Their presence sours the convent's air. You're questioned in a bare refectory. Any heresy? Forbidden texts? The name Clara? You deny everything, but the tall inquisitor's stare lingers, the quiet one scribbling. Clarice, question 2, convincingly lied. Sister Benedetta is taken by the inquisitors, her fate unclear. Wolfhilda says it's about Clara and unforgetting. Avis gathers you, Clarice, and younger sisters in the scriptorium. We can't wait, she says. Wolfhilda plans to smuggle Clarice's copy of the letter out. Clarice insists on taking it, as you're suspected. She leaves through the garden gate, the letter stitched into her robe's hem, vanishing down a pilgrim's path. Historically, convents used laundresses and herbalists to smuggle messages. The next day, the abbess claims Clarice is ill, sent to rest. A carved line in the laundry basin reads, Clara walks among us still, the truth enduring. The abbess sleeps in the chapel, guarding her lineage, not the sacrament. The inquisitors demand all documents. The scriptorium is sealed for days. The tall inquisitor, Frater Luric, marks errors, confiscates poetry, calls blank pages spaces for doubt. Clarice's absence stretches your hope thin. Sister Hildegard, healing slowly, says she didn't fully break under questioning. Female scribes wrote secret countertexts, buried in margins, misattributed to men. A torn prayer fragment under a cloister statue, "Let truth bloom in shadow," is read and burned by Lyric. Benedetta returns, thinner, hair cropped, unbowed. She says she thought of Hildegard's hands and poems, not breaking. The original letter remains hidden under the altar, among supposed relics of Saint Aurelia, with another parchment you and Avis found. Benedetta gives you a rusted key to the catacomb gate. At midnight, you retrieve the letter from the altar and enter the catacombs, the air thick with ancient smoke. The key opens a tunnel to a grove where Clarice waits, tired but alive. You embrace, handing her the letter. "We need to write more," she says. You agree. The truth needs air. By sunrise, the convent is in lockdown, your absence noticed. Your torn psalm page, Psalm 142, "Deliver me, O Lord," unsettles the abbess. The inquisitors search, but you and Clarice reach a monk's shelter Wulfhilda described. You write by firelight, Elodia's confession, Tish's poems, Avis's notes, Wulfhilda's chants, your scribbles, named record array. Remember. Historically, runaway nuns' manuscripts surface centuries later, hidden in secret copies. Theoda arrives with novices Agnes and another, bringing food. They report Benedetta's starvation for suspected knowledge. Clarice gives Theoda 8 pages of record array to distribute to wives, daughters, midwives. Truth was sung in medieval kitchens, disguised in melody. You finish record array, signing it with 3 circles, body, voice, lineage, burying it under an ash tree. The abbess begins coughing, her voice fading, missing mass. Wulfhilda calls it rot beyond illness. Rebecca assumes control, banning unlisted herbs, tightening discipline. The manuscript spreads silently. Poems in closets, sketches on pews, hummed verses. You and Clarice return via a storm drain to the cloister, where the abbess lies dying. You leave a final page by her pillow. Let stones remember what saints forgot. She whispers a creaking sound as you leave with Theoda and Agnes, who burned a fake copy. Some scholars say nunneries hid dangerous knowledge in their shadows. Years later, you and Clarice live as healers in a village. Avis sends herb-hidden letters. Theoda's pressed flowers carry codes. Benedetta writes record array in saints' margins. The abbess dies. Rebecca's bid for power fails. Wulfhilda is chosen abbess, the priest locked out. In 1479, an Italian convent defied a bishop, chaining their chapel for 2 years. You return as guests to a moss-softened convent. Theoda is abbess, Wulfhilda heals, Benedetta teaches, Agnes renames herbs, Avis writes psalms of the unseen. 12 record array copies hide in dresses, tiles, combs. Truth whispers, survives, and you think, we did not vanish. We were written.